Update, brought to you by Simcox Advocates, advising businesses and families since 1949. Visit simcox.com or call 690 300. Manx Radio's Update with Andy Wint.
Faster, good evening. It's 5:30. This is Update for Wednesday, 25th of October, 2023 from Manx Radio. 30 minutes to look at the latest news on the Isle of Man. And background to that news, we got sport and business and Sea Watch and travel updates. And the newsmakers in person this evening. Work permit suspension gets nearer. The MV Manxman moves closer to full capacity. Manx Care's overspending, staff retention and training issues. Verity's North Sea search has been called off, and chess grandmasters getting ready to play on the Isle of Man. The mountain road is closed between the Craignabar and Brandywell.
Man Benham for all your business and legal needs.
First of all, at 29 minutes ahead of 6 o'clock, the Update News headlines. Fastamai, Christian Jones.
Fastamai, the Health Minister's been reacting to Manx Care's annual report, whereby he thinks progress has been made, but further focus needs to be given to staff retention, training and spending. Among the issues highlighted, Laurie Hooper warns financial constraints are likely to impact services. The search for 4 missing crew members from a Manx-registered cargo ship has been called off after it was determined the time frame for survival has passed. 7 people were on board the Verity at the time it sank. 1 person was already confirmed dead and 2 others have been rescued alive. And politicians are expected to debate the work permit system next month as the Department for Enterprise looks to scrap them for 2 years. But backbench MHKs have previously told us they'll be rejecting the proposals. Meanwhile, the Minister maintains something must be done to attract skilled workers. In international news, a former police officer has been jailed for a minimum of 12 years after getting more than 200 young girls to send him explicit images and then blackmail them. 24-year-old Lewis Edwards' actions have been described as despicable. Meanwhile, 2 Met police officers have been sacked after being found guilty of gross misconduct over a stop-and-search incident involving black British athletes. The disciplinary panel says the pair lied about smelling drugs on stopping the vehicle. And the first flight carrying UK aid to Gaza has arrived in Egypt. It had 21 tonnes of humanitarian supplies on board. Those are the Update News headlines. Next at 6.
Man Benham. Contact us by phone, video call, email or face-to-face. We're happy to connect with you. Manx Radio Weather with Manx Glass and Glazing.
Goromaya, thank you. Christian, from the Ronaldsway Met Office, there's a strong wind warning in operation for the North Irish Sea later tonight. State of sea currently slight, later moderate. And the weather dry with increasing cloud after dark. Rain coming in on a fresh southeasterly overnight. Minimum temperature 11. For Jardine, cloudy with occasional outbreaks of rain. Daylight maximum tomorrow is 14 degrees, remaining cloudy through Thursday night. Lowest temperature 11. Into Jehenya, cloudy with patchy rain on Friday right throughout the day. Top temperature 13. Sunset in just under 20 minutes at a minute before 6 tonight. High tides at 9:45. Low water 12 minutes after 4 a.m. Sunrise 6 minutes past 8. High tide 11 minutes past 10.
Manx Glass and Glazing are able to offer an emergency out-of-hours boarding up service. Call 491918.
And remember, the clocks go back this coming Sunday. The Isle of Man is a step closer to suspending the work permit system, but it's not before politicians get the chance to give the green light or to reject it. That story with Christian.
So at the moment, anyone who's not classed as an Isle of Man worker requires one, and that includes residents from the UK who haven't been living and working here for 5 years. Now, if MHKs and MLCs give it the go-ahead, work permits will be scrapped from the start of the new year until the 31st of December 2025, so 2 years. But that date could be pushed back further down the line. There are some exceptions though, and work permits would still be a prerequisite for non-Isle of Man workers who've been convicted of unspent criminal offences. Now, the question on many people's lips is, why do we need to remove work permits? We've heard from backbenchers with concerns like Onken's Rob Callister.
At this moment in time, I don't think the Isle of Man is prepared or ready to remove its work permit system.
But the Minister, Tim Johnston, has always maintained that competition is simply too fierce to not do something.
Any perceptions or any barriers are unnecessary at the moment.
Well, his department says it's due to critical labour shortages shortages across most, if not all, of the island's economic sectors, which is becoming increasingly difficult to attract skilled workers. The latest figures on the labour market show a 0.6% unemployment rate, with the highest number of vacancies in medical and health services, among others. This whole move does form part of government's long-term plans to create and fill 5,000 new jobs and reach an overall GDP of £10 billion by 2032 and contribute towards this 100,000 population figure. Lastly, work permits are paid for, but it's estimated over the past 5 years only £86,000 was received from new ones or renewals annually. But ultimately, additional taxes from these new skilled workers would make up for any takings lost from the current system. The plans were initially due to go before Timor this month, but were delayed due to timing issues over the summer recess.
The motor vessel Manxman, our new boat, will soon be able to sail at full capacity. Since entering service, the steam packet's new vessel has been sailing with a passenger limit of 600 while final crew training was completed. The Treasury Minister, Dr. Allinson, was asked how many times has the Ben McCree been drafted in to ferry passengers to Heysham when the Manxman couldn't sail.
The Ben McCree has replaced the Manxman on 2 occasions. This was due to temporary safety restrictions imposed by the company on the vessel in strong wind conditions, as further experiences of the ship's handling characteristics were being gained at that time. In terms of the number of passengers on the Manxman being limited, he's quite right. Initially this was set at 600 while the final crew training was completed, but actually from this week we should be able to move to mode 2, where up to 948 passengers are allowed onto the vessel if demand dictates.
Given the challenges, are the steam packets still planning to sell the Ben McCree? And if so, when presumably it won't happen before next year's TT, will it? Thank you.
Treasury Minister?
We're going way beyond the scope of this question yet again, Madam Deputy Speaker, but if I could be helpful to the Honourable Member, I think it's been quite clearly stated that the Isle of Man Steam Packet Company cannot sell the Ben McCree without an amendment to the current Strategic Sea Services Agreement with the Department for Infrastructure, although I know that there are plans and in fact a schedule for that to be reviewed, but that wouldn't just be about any proposed sale of a vessel. That would look far wider at the Sea Services Agreement, including important aspects such as fares, the schedules and the routes.
Update brought to you by Simcox Advocates.
Fast by 22 minutes now before 6. The Health Minister's been responding to the healthcare provider's annual report. He says Manx Care has made progress over the last year, but still has work to do on staff retention, training and overspending. The story from Sean Cowper.
Among the issues highlighted by Laurie Hooper is the board's overspend, with a warning the ongoing financial constraints are likely to further impact services, with assurances needed from Manx Care over future accurate financial forecasting. A comprehensive list of waiting times for all services remains outstanding, with Mr Hooper stating that a lack of accurate data makes it difficult to assess progress. He adds that it was disappointing to receive the annual complaints report for the 2021 to 22 year in February this year, describing it as too late to be meaningful. Another area in need of development, according to the Minister's assessment, is progress on compliance with mandatory training, which Mr Hooper said has been slower than expected. Mr Hooper's assessment, which has been published ahead of November's Tynwald sitting, also highlights the positive, including how the winter pressures plan lessened demands at Nobles, the launch of the Mental Health College, and the impact the Restoration and Recovery programme has had on waiting lists. Recruitment and retention of staff remains an area of focus going forward, according to Mr Hooper, as well as developing primary care at scale to enable Manx residents to receive care closer to their homes.
Some of the strongest chess grandmasters in the world are on the Isle of Man as the start of a major tournament gets underway today. Howard Dobson is the chair of the Isle of Man Chess Association. He says this is a big deal and hopes it'll encourage more interest.
The most famous chess player in the world, bar none, is Magnus Carlsen, who is no longer world champion. He relinquished his title, and that's held by Ding Liren, a Chinese player who's currently not attending. But in terms of players, I mean, there are so many of them. Perhaps the two strongest rated players in the tournament, both Americans, Fabiano Caruana and Hikaru Nakamura, who are very, very strong. And then the list is endless. There certainly is a considerable amount of interest in chess on the Isle of Man, but in order to foster that and to improve that, the chess scene needs to look more carefully at providing chess in schools. There are quite a lot of primary schools that do encourage children to play chess, but it competes against many other activities during the school year. So yes, junior chess, and we recently in the last year moved our venue. We're now playing at Prom Space. So we're always encouraging players of all abilities to come down to the club, and we welcome new players, and obviously we'd like to see the game expand. And hopefully this event will offer more advertising for the Isle of Man and chess in general.
Sea Watch with the Isle of Man Steam Packet Company.
The aforementioned motor vessel Manxman left Heysham at 2:30. She'll be into the bay in the next 20 minutes or so. On to the link span shortly after 6 o'clock. This evening's departure is Manxman, heading at 8:15 to Heysham, getting there just before midnight. The overnight departure 2:15 from Heysham, back to Douglas at 6 tomorrow morning. And the morning departure 8:45 Manxman to Heysham, tomorrow afternoon's 2 o'clock Manannan to Liverpool.
Like the Steam Packet on Facebook for the latest sailing information.
A Ukrainian soldier who moved to the Isle of Man to escape the war in Ukraine narrowly avoided being sent to prison. Bogdan Rizuk of South Key in Douglas was sentenced at Douglas Courthouse after assaulting the manager of a supermarket. Tessa Hawley with the report.
The 30-year-old entered the co-op on Duke Street at 8:40 on the evening of the 8th of July. Once inside, he pushed his way to the front of the queue, shouting "drink, drink," and attempted to purchase alcohol. When staff refused to serve him due to his level of intoxication, Rizuk became aggressive and punched the plastic COVID screen. It snapped and flew through the air, hitting a female member of staff. As the manager escorted Rizuk from the premises, he headbutted him in the nose. Door staff from the front porch rushed to assist and managed to detain him in a headlock before he was arrested. Rizuk later admitted assault, a provoking behaviour offence, and causing damage to property. During sentencing, Rizuk's advocate told the court his client hadn't gone into the shop looking to cause trouble, but had become agitated when he thought staff were ignoring him. What happened next was wholly disproportionate, the advocate said. Acknowledging that the incident was deeply distressing for the staff and customers to witness, he added he has no excuse. He apologises for it. Magistrates heard Rizuk had come to the island as a result of the war in his home nation after serving in the east of the country. He carries both physical and emotional scars from that time, the advocate told them. The court heard Rizuk, who was assisted by an interpreter, had been using alcohol to self-medicate and manage his feelings. Hearing he was in breach of a 12-month conditional discharge imposed in January, magistrates told Rizuk he'd caused a great deal of fear to those in the co-op. Imposing a 6-week custodial sentence, which they suspended for 6 months, they told him, "It is clear that you lose control when you've partaken in alcohol."
Manx Radio Business Briefing.
At 16 minutes before 6, in corporate news, Reckitt Benckiser tumbled as the consumer goods giant's third quarter like-for-like sales growth of 3.4% undershot analyst expectations. Reckitt also unveiled plans to return £1 billion to shareholders and laid out a strategy to boost revenues over the medium term. Hewson reported news of £1 billion share buybacks not enough to blind shareholders to an uncertain start for the new Reckitt boss Chris Licht, with like-for-like sales growth coming in slightly below expectations and its nutrition business having a rough quarter. And for the latest market report, a daily market report, go to ramseycrookall.com. Sony's announced its latest Spider-Man release has become the fastest-selling video game made by PlayStation. Spider-Man 2 sold more than 2.5 million physical and digital copies in its first 24 hours. The game game, developed by PlayStation-owned Insomniac Games, was released on Friday for the PS5. It did face some criticism over the fact that its main story takes 15 hours to complete, and that extends to about 40 hours, including side content, a fairly typical length of video games, although some releases, like Baldur's Gate 3, can stretch to hundreds of hours. Despite Spider-Man 2's title, it's the third game in the series, following releases in 2018 and 2020. The latest version takes place in a virtual New York City, and for the first time, gamers can play either as Peter Parker or Miles Morales, both alter egos of the popular superhero.
The Stock Market Report, brought to you by Ramsey Crookall.
UK and European markets were mixed, with investors keeping an eye on the latest earnings reports and business activity data. US stocks fell. Gold was stuck in a narrow $10 trading range, and the oil benchmark Brent held at around $88 as concerns about war escalating in the Middle East offset demand worries stemming from a gloomy economic prospect in Europe. And the numbers now from Ramsey Crookall. At the close in London, the FTSE 100 was up 0.33% at 7,414. The DAX in Frankfurt up barely, 0.08%, barely 0.1% at 14,892. A short time ago in New York City, the Dow Jones Industrial up 0.2%, 33,210. The Nasdaq Tech Stocks Index down 1.5% at the moment at 12,943. The S&P 500 in Chicago down 0.75%, 4,214. In the exchange markets, the British pound sterling is trading at $1 21.4 cents, €1 14.6 cents, and 23 South African rand 14 cents. In commodities, gold up 0.6% currently, $1,983 per troy ounce, and a barrel of Brent crude up 0.5%, $87.59.
You've got an investment plan?
Yeah, Mike set it up.
But don't you need loads of money to do that?
Not this one. It's called Shearwater from Ramsey Crookall, and you pay in monthly as little as £100. So it's like saving regularly, really helping us invest in the future for a house, or the kids' education.
£100 a month? I could easily do that.
You should. The sooner you start, the better.
Invest in your future with as little as £100 a month. Shearwater from Ramsey Crookall, the island's investment specialist for 75 years. Call 717171 or visit ramseycrookall.com. Licensed and regulated by the Isle of Man Financial Services Authority.
This is the most listened to Isle of Man news source, and Manx Radio's Update is the Isle of Man's most downloaded news podcast.
The search for 4 missing crew members from a Manx-registered cargo ship has been called off. The Verity was sailing under the Manx flag from Bremen to Immingham in North Lincolnshire when it was involved in a collision with another vessel in the North Sea. The story from Lewis Foster.
German authorities have confirmed the decision, declaring that the time frame for survival has passed. Officials say the water temperature at the time of the collision was around 12 degrees. 7 people were on board the Verity at the time of its sinking. One person has already been confirmed dead, while a further 2 were rescued alive, with divers searching the water for the 4 missing who it was initially hoped may be alive and trapped in the vessel on the seabed. Nearby boats, including a P&O cruise ship, helped with search efforts on Tuesday. Late yesterday, the Isle of Man Ship Registry released a statement saying its thoughts are with the seafarers that sailed on board the Verity, their families, friends and loved ones.
Manx Radio Sport.
Faster My sports editor Rob Pritchard.
Faster My, good evening. Starting with cycling, and the route for next year's Tour de France has been announced and could present another opportunity for Mark Cavendish to achieve Tour immortality in 2024. Next year's race will begin on the 29th of July, covering 3,492 kilometres across 21 stages, starting in Florence, Italy, and elsewhere. In a big change, it'll finish with a time trial event in Nice. Cavendish, who crashed out of this year's event on stage 8, is currently the joint all-time stage winner on the Tour with 34 victories, level with cycling great Eddie Merckx. Earlier this month, it was confirmed the Manx missile had signed a 1-year contract extension with Astana Kazakhstan going into next year, after previously stating he'd be retiring from the sport at the end of this campaign. Elsewhere, the route for the 2024 Tour de France Femme has also been revealed and will take place from the 12th to the 18th of August. Manx competitor Lizzie Holden has contested the event for the last 2 seasons. In motorsport, TT rider Michael Rutter is set to join the FHO racing team for this year's Macau Grand Prix. The 7-time TT winner will join join forces with fellow TT competitors Peter Hickman and Josh Brooks, with the latter of those two making his debut at the event. This year also marks FHO Racing's debut as a team at the races, whilst Rutter is currently the most successful Macau GP rider ever with 9 wins to his name since making his maiden appearance there in 1994. The 2023 Macau Grand Prix will get underway on Saturday the 11th of November and runs until Sunday the 19th of November. And finally, the Isle of Man badminton squad has learned the nations it will face at an inaugural international tournament taking place next month. The Manx side is set to be involved in the first Small States of Europe Badminton Team Championships, being held in Malta between the 3rd and 5th of November at the Cotonera Sports Complex. Following the draws for the group stage, it's been confirmed the Isle of Man will compete in Group B against Cyprus, Greenland and Iceland. Countries will play each other in a round-robin format for the group phase, followed by a playoff and knockout stage.
Manx Radio Travel, driven by Quayside Tyres and Service Centre.
Inbound at Ronaldsway, the 10 to 6 Loganair from Manchester is delayed until 6:45. The 6:30 inbound EasyJet from Belfast is on time. The 10 to 8 Loganair to London City is on time. 8:20 inbound Loganair from Liverpool will be in at around 9 o'clock tonight. And the 25 to 9 EasyJet inbound from Gatwick is on time. Outbound, the 6:25 Loganair from Liverpool is delayed, to Liverpool is delayed until 7:10. The 7 o'clock outbound to Belfast International on time. The 9:05 EasyJet back to London Gatwick is on time. And on the roads, remember the Newcastle Town roads closed between Spring Valley Roundabout and the bottom of Richmond Hill for resurfacing. Junction at the bottom of Richmond Hill's reopened and traffic diverted along the Energy from Waste Plant access road to the top of Quegg Hill. Temporary lights in Port St Mary, the junction of Queen's Road and Park Road for gas main work. Queen Street, Castletown's closed for resurfacing work, and in Peel, temporary lights on Peveril Road for resurfacing. Hillside Avenue is closed in Douglas for adjacent office window replacement, and temporary lights on Glen Crutchery Road at the roundabout with Victoria Road for resurfacing. Temporary lights on the Braid roundabout for patching work, and in Solby, temporary lights on Solby Glen Road for culvert cleaning. And remember, at the moment, the matrix signs are showing that the mountain road is closed between the Craignabar and Brandywell.
H&Hmotorcycles.im for all your motorcycle requirements. Southgate Industrial Estate, opposite Quayside Tyres. Call 665646.
There are calls for the findings of a review into the Isle of Man's air services to be published more than 2 years after the work was carried out. Former Infrastructure Minister Chris Thomas MHK will ask for the Department of Enterprise to publish the report when Tynwald sits next month. The Douglas Central MHK says the review makes a number of recommendations on routes and how the island works with airlines.
The review was completed. The review was completed over the general election in 2021. It analysed how we should have routes. My motion in November calls for the Department for Enterprise to publish the review that was undertaken around the general election time, which makes recommendations about air services, about the routes, about how we should engage with airlines, about that. And I think it would all be better off if we all had access to the same information that I believe the sitting airlines have and council ministers have. There's lots of problems at the airport, and there's a motion that I took through in April which aims to deal with those problems. Mostly that involves more money coming forward from the Treasury, but it also involves having a board to challenge and support the airport management. So that's the airport issues, and we know that the air traffic control, security around baggage, they're important issues for that. Alongside that, there's the nature of the air routes we have to the island, the air services, and this report was from consultants engaged by the Department for Enterprise about how we should treat our routes to the northwest, our routes to the southeast, our routes to our island, and I hope that government will have the confidence to publish the review it received from the work that was done around the general election time back in 2021, and then we can have a grown-up debate and build consensus about how we should be approaching the existing airlines that help us, EasyJet, Emerald and Loganair, and perhaps also encourage new airlines to come forward like the Department of Infrastructure and DfE have worked together to get in terms of direct flights from the island and other possibilities.
Update Brought to you by Simcox Advocates, advising businesses and families since 1949. Visit simcox.com or call 690 300.
A charity which supports and protects the welfare and well-being of people with autism on the Isle of Man says it vehemently opposes the introduction of assisted dying legislation. Autism in Man has described proposed safeguards contained in a consultation document as vague and in places contradictory. Here's Tessa Hawley.
Ramsey MHK Alex Allinson's assisted dying bill will have its second reading in the House of Keys next week. It aims to enable certain adults who are terminally ill to be provided, at their request, with specified assistance to end their own life. But the charity says in its considered opinion it would be a very small step from the proposed legislation to a situation where medical professionals could advocate ending the life of someone with autism. As parents of autistic children of all ages, we bear a responsibility of care which will endure until we die, at which time that responsibility will pass in entirety to the medical and social care system, the charity says. It goes on, in our considered opinion, it would be a very small step from the proposed legislation to a situation where medical professionals could advocate ending the life of someone with autism simply because they consider an autistic individual's life to be intolerable without any prospect for improvement. Opposition to the bill, which the charity submitted, was, it believes, either overlooked or ignored. Autism in Man adds that none of the concerns its members raised featured in Dr. Allinson's final report. It would appear that Dr. Allinson is not prepared to publicly acknowledge the likely impact such legislation would have on the disabled community or those who lack capacity, presumably, they say, in case it jeopardised the passage of his bill. Now, we put Autism in Man's statement to Dr. Allinson. In response, he told Manx Radio there is no provision in the legislation for it to be extended to children, those who lack capacity, those who are not dying of a terminal illness, or those who have a disability.
That's it for Update Tonight, compiled from the resources of Manx Radio's news department. Thanks to newsreader Christian Jones, producer Lewis Foster. After the news at 6, it's the arts programme Spotlight with Howie Kane, Greatest Hits with Chris Kinley at 6:30, the Opera Hour with Ernie Thorne at 9, and Rianne's here at 10 with After Hours The Late Show. That's it from Andy. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. I'll be back tomorrow at 5:30.
WINT